again, Dr. Mashburn, and this is going to be the beginning of your bone lab videos. And so the bone lab videos are going to be broken down into PowerPoint videos where I'll go through the bones and their structures, and then also some YouTube videos with Miss Graham where we will videotaped her in the lab going through the bones. So between the two sets of lab videos, you should have a good understanding of all the bones you need to learn and their features. All right, so remember, how we're going to break down these bone labs is we're going to break them down into the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So your first lab videos are going to cover all the bones in the axial skeleton. You're going to have a video about the bones that are in the skull, which is the cranium around the brain, and then the facial bones, which makes up your face. And then you're going to have a video about the thoracic cage, which is your ribs, and then your vertebral column, or your quote-unquote backbone, okay? So that's going to be your axial skeleton videos. Then you'll have a separate set of videos with the appendicular skeleton, which will cover your shoulders and your arms and your hips and your legs. Okay, so that's how we're going to break this down. Again, when you look at the bones, I put this picture in here because all of your bones are labeled for you. So if you're looking for a kind of one place with all of your bones named, you've got these two pictures for you, and it's divided up into the appendicular and axial skeleton, where the axial is in blue and the appendicular is in this beige color. All right, so that'll kind of a reference point as you're moving through your labs. Again, one thing I want to point out when we talk about our bones, you're going to need to know these bones as individual bones and also as part of a skeleton. So on your lab test, you may see a complete skeleton, and I'll say, like, name that bone, or I may have that individual bone laying out. And you'll kind of see this as we move through our lab videos, but you're not just going to have 40 pictures of a skeleton that says name that bone, name that bone, name that bone. You will see the individual bones separated from the skeleton. All right, and the other thing that can be a part of this test are the cartilages, because we've talked about that your skeleton has cartilages associated with it. So just as a reminder, you need to go back and review where your hyaline cartilages are, your elastic cartilages, and your fibrocartilages. And then lastly, as you're learning your bones, make sure, we're going to try to remember to tell you in the video, but you may need to look in your book, be able to classify a bone as to whether it's a long bone or a flat bone or a short bone or an irregular bone. All right, so that's another thing to look at as you're learning your bones for the lab test. And then the final part of the lab test, there will always be some microscope slides. We always want to think about the microanatomy. And so this is going to be the microanatomy portion of the lab. You're going to see a picture from the microscope. Remember, bone is connective tissue, and this is a picture of compact bone. And you can see this is an osteon, and you can see the different layers, the lamella, and you can see the little lacuna or cell homes. You can even see the little canaliculi in this slide between the different osteocytes. If you haven't seen this part in your lecture video, you may not have gotten that far yet, but you will get a more in-depth talk about the osteon and all the different parts. And I've put a review slide in here for you. So again, if you haven't got to that part in lecture, you will. But the parts I want you to know is the osteon, which is the structural unit, which is one of these sets of tree rings. Okay, so again, if you haven't covered this in lecture, you will. I want you to know what the lamella is, and so each one of these layers is a lamella. Okay, so we've got the lamella there. I want you to know the central canal. Each osteon has a central canal, which are these little circles here. It's got an artery, a vein, and a nerve associated with it. You have Volkmann's canals, or perforating canals, which are the little canals that connect the central canals. You have the lacuna, which are the little cell homes that have osteocytes inside of them. And then you have these little small canals, these canaliculi that connect the lacuna. So again, you'll see this again in lecture. It's also in your textbook, but just be prepared for a question on the microanatomy and the osteon. All right, so just as a reminder, as you're going through your lab videos, make sure you print out the lab guide. The lab guide has two tables. You have bone names and bone features. Okay, so you need to be able to identify each and every bone and be able to spell it, and you have to identify the features. So things like trochanters, foramen, a meatus, things like that. Um, all the different features. Now, your textbook lists hundreds and hundreds of features. You only have to learn the features listed in the lab guide. And so as we go through the videos, we will point out those features. So don't go learning a lot of features you don't need to know, just the ones that either myself or Miss Graham point out in our videos. All right, and then again, you need to identify the parts of the osteon. So this just gets you ready. So we'll start with our bones of the axial skeleton. We'll do our cranial bones and then our facial bones. And then you'll follow up with your bones for the thorax, the ribs, the vertebral column, then the shoulders, then the arms, then the hips, and then the legs. Okay, thank you very much.